as a journalist, you know, things have changed so much. My question with a lot of people that work in the news business is what has happened to journalism in America?
It's a great question. And what happened is that journalists became advocates rather than recorders of truth, recorders of events, or witnesses to events. And more you see that advocacy. Now, we at Breitbart are conservative and we're very open about that. So our journalism does take a point of view, but it also has to be accurate. We're actually judged more severely for being conservative. There really is a double standard. If you're on the left, you get away with mistakes, you get away with spin. We can't. We're under very close watch. And so we have to be accurate, even though we have a point of view and our opinion articles are very openly conservative. We have to be accurate and we want to be accurate. We want to give our readers and our listeners on our radio shows the best and most accurate information. On the left wing side, there are many more choices because so much of the media, basically 90% of the media, is on the left. And so you're seeing a kind of consensus that's developing as this advocacy journalism becomes stronger and more partisan, where journalists just are afraid to go outside that consensus. And if you go outside, if you dissent from what the other journalists are saying, well, you might as well be writing for Breitbart. You might as well be conservative. There's no room, even on the left, for any kind of dissent. And because the left dominates the mainstream publications and the mainstream cable news and so forth, the public gets a very skewed impression of what's actually happening. For example, in the riots that have gone on in many American cities, Democrats and the media have described them as peaceful protests. Well, they're not peaceful protests, and they're riots. They've tried to get away with it by saying, well, the march was peaceful until they got to the police station, and then it got violent when they started firing projectiles into the police headquarters or smashing windows. Well, you don't get to call it a peaceful protest if the procession on the way to the confrontation happens to be free of violence. It doesn't work that way. And yet we don't see that coverage in the mainstream media. They're not covering the violence. They're not covering the protests. In fact, Jerry Nadler, the chair of the House Judiciary Committee, said over the weekend, last weekend, that the story of Antifa, the so-called anti-fascist anarchist group committing violence in Portland, was just a myth. And you can believe it's a myth if you don't see it on your local news, if you don't see it on cable news, you don't see it on CNN. And the only place that's showing it is Breitbart or Fox News. So that's the problem, is that the advocacy journalism in the media is preventing Americans from seeing the whole picture and making appropriate decisions. And I don't think these protests would last a single day longer if the American people could see what was actually going on. They would not tolerate it, and the journalists would be ashamed of it. They would criticize it. The Democrats would run away from it. But because it's being hidden from you, people persist with this idea of peaceful protest. Nobody opposes peaceful protest, so they go on and the riots continue.